everybody, I'm Jamie of Pandora Astrology, and with me is
Julia Mijas joining in from San Francisco.
Right, and I'm here in Berkeley. And we want to tell you about the Mercury retrograde periods that are happening this year, 2021. And here's the first of the charts. Now, Mercury retrograde is something that happens several times a year, usually 3 times a year. Mercury has a whole cycle that it goes through that takes about 4 months. And then it has within that cycle a period of retrogradation that lasts about 3 weeks. Now, human beings in our minds, we have a bias towards having things proceed forward in a linear way without obstruction. And so because we're kind of out of alignment with nature on this one, nature actually happens in cycles. And that means that sometimes there has to be backward movement in order for there to be forward movement again. And this is why we kind of hate Mercury retrograde. And so Mercury retrograde is good for some specific things, but not good for other specific things. Another thing I want you to know is that in any given year, usually the 3 Mercury retrograde periods will all fall in the same element. And that will tell us something about the areas of life and the sorts of experiences that we're likely to have while Mercury is retrograde this year, and the sorts of tangles and snarl ups that we're going to face. Now, Julia, when you think about Mercury retrograde in general, what do what sorts of advice do you usually give people about how to handle a Mercury retrograde period smoothly?
I think what the best advice is to try to be very flexible in your thinking, especially wherever Mercury retrograde, whichever house it happens to be falling under in your personal horoscope.
Mm.
And, Mercury retrograde is a time of redoing and reviewing things. And
Mm.
also, I would just sort of say that in how you communicate with people during that time, be prepared to have to go over things that you may have already said, whether they seemed clear to you at the time or not.
Yeah, yeah. So Mercury rules Gemini and it rules Virgo. And in its rulership of Gemini, it governs communication, which means like sending messages. It means how you talk to people, how you listen to people. You might have to do some do-overs during Mercury retrograde. It also rules Virgo, and that governs things like systems and even like office machinery. So this is why people complain, oh, why does that fax break down every time Mercury goes retrograde? And if you're really keeping your office machinery in good shape and maintaining things, then you don't have to suffer from Mercury retrograde quite so much. So this year we've got these 3 Mercury retrograde periods. The first one is happening in Aquarius, and it begins January 30th, as you can see on the diagram. And then it has an Epiphany Day in the middle on February 8th, and then it completes on February 20th. Julia, what do you think Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, what do you think are the best, forms of advice for that?
Well, Aquarius is the sign of groups, and Mercury is where we put our thinking, where we communicate, where we strategize. So there might have to be some reviewing of the groups that you're a part of in your life, maybe miscommunications among friendships as well.
Yeah, I would definitely watch out for that stuff. Might need to do some do-overs. So the second Mercury cycle, Mercury retrograde period of the year is happening in May and June. It begins May 29th as Mercury turns retrograde in the sign of Gemini. And then it will back up through Gemini, forming a lesser Epiphany Day on June 10th, and then turn direct on June 22nd. And just a quick note about Lesser Epiphany Day. It's the day that Mercury conjuncts the sun. While the sun is moving forward and Mercury is traveling backward, they meet in the sky in a burst of insight. That is often the day in which you get some clarity, some aha moment that lets you know how to get through the rest of the Mercury retrograde period. This one happening in Gemini. Julia, what do you think is going to be the major theme of this one?
Well, since Gemini is the sign of Mercury, it has a lot to do, and it's an air sign. It's a very social sign. It's also a sign that really favors abstract thinking.
Mm.
The associations that you make. So I think that Mercury retrograde cycle is going to affect people in their more abstract plans and their more abstract strategies too.
Yeah, it might literally be hard to think clearly. And I got to tell you, the Geminis and the Virgos of the world pretty much hate when Mercury is retrograde, and it's a good idea to know about it when it's happening and have warning when it's coming up. But a Mercury retrograde in Gemini, which might land in your birthday chart and affect you all year, yeah, that sounds like a real caution and something to know about, before it happens. Okay, then we have the third one of this year, which is happening in October. And this one features Mercury turning retrograde in Libra on September 26th and conjuncting the Sun in Epiphany Day on October 9th at 16 of Libra, and then continuing backwards until it turns direct at earlier in Libra, 10 degrees on October 18th. What are your thoughts, Julia, about Mercury retrograde in Libra? What do you think people are going to have to clean up during that one?
Well, Libra is the sign of partnerships of all kinds. So this can definitely affect us in our relationships, communication with a partner. But it could also affect partnerships such as people that you work with, if you have a business partner, or anybody that you consult with too, any one-to-one kind of dynamic.
That's exactly right. So if you work as a therapist or as a consultant of any kind, or an agent or a representative, even a lawyer, this one might really be challenging for you. And it's good to know that it's coming, and it's good to that there might be some cleanup that needs to happen, and that's okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. We loved making it for you. You can find it on our YouTube channel, Pandora Astrology, and we'll see you around the cosmos. Bye.
Bye-bye.